You're listening to Talking Africa, the podcast that gets behind the news from the continent, brought to you by the Africa Report. I'm Nicholas Norbrook. Welcome to the program. Listeners to this podcast can get a special discount to our new digital edition. Send us an email with Talking Africa in the subject line to feedback@theafricareport.com to claim your offer today. In a piece that went up on our site on Wednesday about the menace to Abuja from the Islamist group Boko Haram, a retired army general told us that no military or law enforcement approach, even in the most sophisticated of societies, can resolve political differences, especially of violent sectarian kind, when consistently fed by ancient suspicion and mistrust. These themes are at the core of our conversation with today's guest, the multi-talented former Nigerian cabinet minister and former vice president of the Africa region of the World Bank, Obiageli Ezekwesili. Many of you will know her as the co-ordinator of the Bring Back Our Girls campaign. She was also the co-founder of Transparency International. And she has a new role, one of educator, but more on that later. Right now, we start at the beginning with her earliest memories.
I had a very active family, but not noisy. It was a family that was filled with so much love. Two parents were people of a similar mindset, believed more in character than they believed in just making money anyhow, by any means. So we were raised to believe in diligence. My dad would say that, if we would just be serious with our education and pay every attention to the values that they were instilling in us, that we would have the character, we would have the knowledge, and then we would have the good name that they have built, which is a name that is associated with good deeds. So they never give us anything other than a constant teaching that we may not be financially would reach, but that we were very wealthy in values. I loved that. I loved every time that they said we were wealthy in values. And so that's basically defined my growing up. And then when I became an adult, I couldn't depart from it because that's what I'd been raised on. And it's followed me throughout my careers. My careers in private sector, civil society, in government, in international development, those foundational constructs that my parents laid for us have been very important in shaping my beliefs.
It's can you still hear me?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. No, I was saying it certainly is a leitmotif of yours, co-founding Transparency International, cleaning up the budget process in Nigeria and earning the nickname of Madame Due Process, bringing Nigeria into the extractive industries transparency initiative, and then in recent years, championing the Bring Back Our Girls initiative. Are there any episodes from your childhood where we can spy the future campaigner for justice that you become today?
So I always tell the story of when the then military government decided that Nigerian children were not disciplined enough, and that they needed to instill discipline in schools, and so they decided in their very strange idea of a solution to send military officers to schools in order to be the what do you call it? The discipline merchants or whatever it was they had in mind to uphold discipline in the schools. And so we had a certain Captain Obembe in my own school, and he took such delight in just caning anyone indiscriminately. You didn't have to do anything wrong. It's just the fact that he cited a student, he would cane. For some reason, I just never got any of the canes, but it always upset me. It always upset me that, my classmates would be caned, my schoolmates would be caned for no reason other than the fact that Captain Obembe loved to use his cane. And so one of the days that he used the cane on a classmate of mine, I was so offended on that day, and I just thought that I was going to stand up to him because I'd been hoping that I would have that opportunity to tell him that he shouldn't cane us indiscriminately. So when that particular one happened, that I just stood up to him and I said, Captain Obembe, you should not have caned her. She didn't do anything. And it was like everybody was stupefied. Like, what is this? Catherine, what are you doing? Because not even the teachers could look at Captain Obembe in the eyes in those days, and I stood my ground. And Captain Obembe said, who are you talking? I said, I'm talking to you. You shouldn't cane anyhow, because when you cane people anyhow, then nobody knows why exactly you're caning them. So somebody hasn't done anything, you cane them. Somebody has done something, you cane them. How do you even think that that's going to help anybody? And Captain Obembe said, if you don't stop talking now, I'm going to cane you. I said, you will not cane me. At that point, my school principal and the teachers, came out of their staff rooms, and it was like, what, Catherine? But Captain Obembe raised his cane, but it never landed on me. And Captain Obembe, interestingly, from that day, never caned people indiscriminately. You had to do something for Captain Obembe to cane you. The idea that somebody could just walk and he would just lift his cane and cane, that ended with that episode. And for me, it really taught me a lesson. And yeah, of course, amongst my schoolmates, I became a heroine. And then my teachers just simply thought this Catherine of a girl, my goodness, but they loved it. They loved the fact that, I stood up to that fellow, because it was absolutely necessary for us not to have an environment where people were being caned indiscriminately. So yes, I didn't stand up for myself. I stood up for my schoolmate, but in a way, what I did was to stand up for a principle, which is that you don't blur the lines of sanctions by just distorting sanctions and reward.
That is a fantastic story. There are many good books emerging at the moment on Nigerian history, trying to make sense of the 100 or so years prior to independence. And one of the things that emerges, certainly in one of them, a book called Formation, is the deep differences in the way that different parts of the country were colonized and then run. The north of Nigeria had 100 years first of the Sokoto Caliphate, which was run in a relatively brutal manner. And then the north was conquered by the British in a brutal manner and run by the British colonial police in a brutal manner. Now, you mentioned Captain Obembe. Given these generations of violence in the north, how can or how should the north be administered? What are the solutions?
I think that it is very clear that there is an important conversation that needs to happen. The conversation around what seemingly is a clash of civilization, which is that, countries, and we've seen that in Europe also, have violent past. And the question has always been, the question has always been whether, that violence past would continue into the future. Some countries sort of just make improvements and leave behind the past. It is not something that is strictly African or strictly Nigerian or even Northern Nigerian. Northern Nigeria. We've seen it in Europe. We've seen it in America and the Civil War. So all of that matter of how nation states come into existence, we know historically that there's nothing particularly exceptional in the violence that, that's part of the story of the process of formation of countries and of eventually nations. But the real challenge in the case of Nigeria is that whereas we became a country, we have not become a nation. We stopped short of that. And that's the problem. We have a transition that has not happened. And because that transition has not happened, the basis of the emergence of what we call our territory, continues to haunt the Nigerian construct.
So, in which case, how do we do that? Obviously, it's not just Nigeria, as you say. There are plenty of countries in Africa which were ruined by the red pen of the colonial map drawers. But how do you then create the nation? There used to be an effort in Nigeria to have mixing of administrative offices, that you would go, for example, and work in the east for a while and spend time in the north. I think President Obasanjo was quite keen on Nigeria and the idea of a nation and projecting beyond small regional bases. But how does that happen? Do we need to teach history better in schools? Do we need kids to salute a flag every morning like they do in the United States? How do you create these positive forms of nationalism?
So, often when we read things that talk about elite consensus, there is a tendency to look at it and say, oh, you want to create a classist society. And so keep it at the level of egalitarianism and just let everybody not, be at that level of, commonality in the way they are perceived. Well, I think that what people miss in the process of that argumentation is the necessity for there to be rallying blocks within any society that would propel the rest of society in the direction of the common good. I would say that it is, in fact, the absence of even an elite class that has cost us, some such incredible degree of regression in that necessary transition process. What do I mean by this? We unfortunately ended up not with what you could call an elite class, properly so-called, but we ended up with a scattershot of people who emerge in a very skewed and very distorted leadership recruitment process that don't frankly get it when it comes to the matter of the common good. We have not been served by the kind of leadership class that our country has produced. If we were well served, the emergence of a certain quality of political leadership would have made it mandatory for us to make that transition from country to nation. What has been the common denominator amongst the political leadership, whether they be military or the sporadic political, but lately much more stable political, because we're now 21 to going on 22 years of unbroken democracy. I would say that it is this matter of subordination of the common good for narrow and private interests that has cost us considerably the opportunity for us to have the kind of conversation that then leads to a unity of purpose. You have to have that unity of purpose conversation, driven by people who understand that it is necessary for a country of diverse people. And we haven't. Times when we have had one form of conference or conversation or the other, it has, the underbelly of it ends up being about narrow interest or personal interest, and it then negates the key ingredients for nation formation. And we continue to struggle with that. So to that extent, we haven't been able to frame a present consensus, nor have we been able to use a present consensus to frame the future. And that future would then include things like what our children should know. I mean, you can't define what our children should know very well, as in children being whether the child is from the east, west, north, or south, or the central of Nigeria. You can't define it very well until the adults actually know that they believe in something that all the children should believe in. So we are caught in this web of a distorted, and fractious leadership class that only finds a common ground in the willingness to trade the common good for personal or narrow interests. So to fix it, I think the coming of age of the Nigerian citizens would be the biggest transformation that can happen. From within the Nigerian citizenry, as in if you may just say like the citizen sector. I'm not saying civil society now, because civil society ends up being a small percentage of some of the people in society. But I'm talking about the Nigerian people who have simply been citizens, not people who have exercised any form of political leadership. From amongst them, an emergence of an appetite for a national conversation that is genuine, that is about, okay, do we agree that there is much more that we can be than we currently are? How do we go from this point of almost deep-seated disenchantment with ourselves, with one another, to where we can see that there is actually real unity and diversity that can emerge and that can propel us to top performance as a people and as a country? That conversation would have to happen. And I think that all of what we see in the country today suggests that, hidden in all the anger and the pain and the sorrow and the state of uncertainty and fear and anxiety, there is that silver lining that we just may get fortunate and have that conversation.
You are no doubt referring to the end SARS moment of a few months ago, when it did appear that a national consensus about what the Nigerian state could and should be doing in terms of security, and it does seem that is the real basis for everything, more important perhaps than access to food even. That's what the social contract should be written on first of all. You give up a little of your own sovereignty in exchange for security, political goods, but security. And it's hard to see an area where Nigeria as a state, as a nation, is failing its people harder than in this realm of security, when violence meant to be the monopoly of the state, and instead we have hundreds of non-state actors wreaking violence on citizens across the nation. So do you think that we are really seeing, as you put it, the coming of age of the Nigerian citizen?
I think we already seen it, but it's yet early days, because you imagine what even then happened with NSAS. You imagine that we had a situation where you had similarly disenfranchised, is that the right word? I think disaffected or ordinarily excluded young people in the northern part of the country who clearly know that the nation state is failing, but they wouldn't want to assert that simply because there is an ethnic coloration to ascertain that. So you look at the North, and the Northerners suddenly say, "Oh, we're fine. And SARS is good. SARS is good. SARS does nothing. That warrants its being scrapped." And that's because they think that the conversation on SARS is a commentary on the president who happens to be from their part of the country. That shouldn't be happening in 2021. That shouldn't be happening in 2020. Shouldn't even be happening in 2019. Shouldn't have happened in 2015. Because in 2015, Nigerians simply looked at the matter of the state of the nation. How do you go from one state of governance to a better state of governance? A lot of people who voted in 2015 thought they were voting for an improvement in governance. They didn't. I don't think it would have mattered where President Buhari or Chibajo are from. To them, there was that sense that they wanted better governance. But they've been served even worse governance. Now, that fusion of vision that there could be better. There could be better. There's a place called better. There is something called better. There is a certain kind of governance that is called better. That fusion of mindset around it was manipulated not to happen in the case of NSAS. So you saw NSAS suddenly being made to be a southern affair. And that is dangerous, because the matter of insecurity is not a southern affair. The failure, if you even said that the police were harassing citizens, mostly in the South, because what the police men who were doing that. The reason, if you thought about it analytically, you will know that it is because there is much more economic opportunity. More young people in the South would have access to money. They were the ones carrying their laptop, doing their IT work. And so, they were not the same number of young people with those kinds of opportunities in the northern part of the country. The police in the northern part of the country, therefore, have no incentive to, stop the young man on the street. What would they stop him for? So analytically, just simply saying that SARS is good in the north is wrong. Because you have stopped short of granular analysis of why the behavior of the police in the north is different from the behavior of the police in Port Harcourt, in Lagos, or elsewhere where there are more opportunities for the police to try to extort money from these young people. However, yet, what the Northerners are dealing with is a complete collapse of the institution of security. And so couldn't they even see an alignment? There was a clear alignment of goals. The police, the Nigerian military needed some real work, needed some real action on the part of the commander-in-chief of the armed forces. So it could easily have been a conversation around the matter of state effectiveness. When you look at the institutions of governance, they don't sort of discriminate in their failure. When they fail, they really fail, right? So it could have been that. But the citizens were manipulated, and suddenly you had some of the northern young people vocal on Twitter, just throwing insults at their southern peers. For what purpose? Just because they are being misled into thinking that everyone is not entitled to good governance. If the Singaporean can have a certain level of governance that enabled a prosperous society for them, so much so the northern child, the southern child, the eastern child, the western child in Nigeria.
How do we break down these two echo chambers, the one in the north, the one in the south? A colleague of ours spoke to a herder from whom he gets his milk. And this herder was just as angry at the AK-47 toting cattle rustlers as many in the south are. Not just because they're all being tarred with the same brush. Oh, all these herders, they're all violent, they're all coming in to do no good. But also because his community was suffering from serious violent attacks too. How urgent is it that we get these stories out there so that we don't fall into the simple characterizations of communities that often do precede serious ethnic violence?
Well, it's always been the game in town for the political class to manipulate religion, to manipulate ethnicity, to manipulate geography, and any other thing that they can manipulate as a basis of divide and rule in order to maintain the status quo. Right. The thing though is that the cost of standing up to those constituencies by some of the people who should in society is so high that people look at it and they say, I am not prepared to pay this cost. That's the reason why you would find instances where somebody in the north or somebody in the south knows clearly that something is wrong in a particular matter, and that it shouldn't be being characterized the way it is being characterized. And they dare not, stick up their head and say, this is wrong. Okay, think of a little version of that. A little version of that is what you saw with the former emir of Kano. The former emir of Kano said to his kindred in the north that, look, the north is falling behind in terms of attainment of educational goals, social goals, many of the indicators that measure development. You are way behind, and something needs to be done. I mean, you would think that everybody would say, yes, something needs to be done. But what did it cost him? It cost him the throne. So not many are ready to stick up their heads and to say, let's call a spade and not an agricultural implement. So that is a reason for the perennial setback in our capacity to rally the non-state actors who form what I would call the coalition of the willing. There needs to emerge a very strong coalition of the willing who are prepared to say, let's even have a genuine conversation, a no-holds-barred conversation. Nigeria has forced people to put a lot of things under the carpet. Waiting until when? So those things that have been swept under the carpet has become so overtaken by the debris hidden under it that it is now saying, I am tired. So we must have this conversation. I recently tweeted and said, I don't know what country it is that all the people I see beating the drums of a presidential race in 2023 are planning to govern. Is it this same Nigeria that is wobbly at this moment? Is it this same Nigeria where none of the ethnic groups is in a state of peace? Every ethnic group, every zone in this country is thinking that there is something that needs to be spoken, to be talked about. They feel like they've not been heard. They feel like they are hurting. And this is not unusual. We've had cycles of this in the past, but nothing close to what we have seen. This is the worst that we have seen in terms of our divisions. I mean, we got unfortunate with a president whose stock in trade is to sharpen the divisions amongst his own people. And so here we are, without that clear sense of, a core of Nigerians who are holding up the nation, holding up the country, and supporting the process that we may not be where we should be, but don't let this collapse. Don't let this house collapse. There is less and less of that core group today than we used to have. Maybe to say that there is a different variation of that needs to emerge, and it belongs to our younger ones. Our millennials have come of age. Our millennials are now in their 30s, right? So it means that they could come out together and face the nation state and say to the Nigerian state, not the nation state, it's a Nigerian state because we're not yet a nation. They faced the Nigerian state and said, stop killing. They got their voice. They tried to enforce their right. The brutal Nigerian state came after them, used all kinds of tactics to destroy what was a golden moment to support the process of that conversation. That conversation would have led to the emergence of a new social contract, a new social contract. But once again, the political class proved incapable of having an intellectually rigorous conversation because they simply don't have it as part of their DNA.
There's so many interesting things that you spoke about there, and it's hard to know in which direction to go. But you talk about this difficulty that when people do stand up, they are punished. The Emir of Kano, when he stood up, he was dethroned. So, how do we help young people in particular, have their own Captain Obembe moment? What avenues do you think are working? Do you think social media is a help or a hindrance? What will future success in gathering this coalition of the willing look like?
I think they are forming their coalition. They don't need our help. I just love something about the young people. At a certain level, I actually admire the irreverence that they have for these organized systems, because the organized systems in our country are really not organized. They are appropriated systems. And so when the young ones have near contempt for these appropriated systems, I frankly look at it and I say, I understand why. These systems haven't proven themselves credible. And so the young people don't think that they owe any form of respect for systems that have proven themselves to be unworthy of the respect. So that I would say that the young people just need a little bit of clarity on what the end game is. What's the end game? The end SARS was a symptom of a deeper malaise that the country suffers. The real problem is that we have been bedeviled by bad governance. To call it poor governance is to be charitable. So bad governance, we've seen it. It's robbed this country and robbed the young ones of a good foundation on which to excel. So just knowing that they are in search of something, they have awoken to the fact that they could be more, and that the obstacle that is in their way is actually this thing called government. And they are now much more open to the conversations that they never were open to. A lot of our young ones in the past, when you talked about government, they just said to you, no, forget it. It's something that old people do. But now they're realizing that, hey, we want to create our own table. Let them create their table. I just want to see them create their table, and in creating their table, to make a determination not to repeat the mistakes of the older generation. The mistakes of the older generation, cannot. You can't transport it into your new table and expect any different outcome. So I would say that they are well on their way. It may not appear so, because you have to say to yourself, what are the big things that we need to say in order to give us that confidence that the young people are framing a different future for this country. If you looked at it from the big things, you might say, I see nothing in the horizon. But if you looked at it from the small things, I see that every day. I see young people basically just overcoming hurdles. If you even looked at a hurdle as, say, a young person who is in business and has to jump so many hoops in order to just manage to keep that business going, and they just don't let it break their spirit, and they continued until they would find a way to excel and bring their heads up, and suddenly a company from anywhere in the world sees the good they are doing and buys into the idea. Now that for me is remarkable. And I see that the way that they run now, they understand that, okay, we cannot compartmentalize, we cannot do this silo approach where we're only interested in our entrepreneurship, where we're only interested in building companies that do great things. They are more socially conscious. I see them every day. I see them talking about governance every day. I mean, I see it in the fact that when I went away and did the research as a Richard von Weizsäcker Fellow at the Robert Bosch Academy in Berlin, Germany, and I decided that that part of my research was going to include getting as many Nigerians as were interested in and curious about how politics was undermining or is undermining the continent involved in my research. And I reached out to a number of them. The young ones were so excited to come to the round table. And these are people who normally would have nothing to do with politics, but they were curious about understanding the effect of bad politics, poor governance on their own endeavors and on the collective good of society. So when I look at those little flicks of light, I'm able to say, aha, did we not read a famous book about the tipping point? It doesn't happen overnight. It doesn't, something dramatic and big doesn't just happen. But the tipping point is a conflagration that occurs at a certain point because little dots of things were happening that nobody was aware of. It's a contagion effect. And that contagion effect is going to happen in this country. We can't stop it.
I love that image of entrepreneurs realizing that actually they can't ignore the state of the state. It's very important for them. So that's an interesting area where consciousness of these issues is raising. Are there other venues? I mean, you spoke, for example, of elites manipulating religion. Are there areas where religion can be useful for having these debates? Your husband is a pastor with the Redeemed Christian Church of God, the RCCG, which seems like almost an establishment church in Nigeria, with many serving and previous top officials present in RCCG churches on Sundays. And this is purely a hunch, as I've never been myself, but do you find that RCCG events serve a civil purpose in Nigeria where elites can discuss matters in a different atmosphere than you can get in the press or in administration buildings, and actually quite a useful forum, more convivial, more grounded perhaps, where difficult matters of state can get talked through with less noise and more listening to one another?
I wouldn't even advocate for that. The reason is that the foundation of the church is a very strong spiritual foundation, and we we're constructed on the idealism that the Word of God is sacrosanct in the things that we do. And that when the Word of God says that you cannot mix the spiritual and the carnal, we have to be conscious of that. So we can't turn the church into a place to have the conversation about the issues in the issues of the state. However, what the church is increasingly learning is that the church is an organism within society, and that because it is an organism within society, it does have a role to play in the emergence of stronger, more resilient societies, and that the church, according to the Word of God, should be the light of the world, should be the salt of the earth, which therefore means that it is not the four walls of the church that should be that. It is the people within the church. So what is that now creating? It's creating an enthusiasm for the message that is delivered in church to also be laced with admonitions on how good citizenship should be, how public leadership should be expressed by one who is in Christ, and it's not something that the church does as in a habitual kind of manner, but it is becoming a pattern. And that is good for society. You don't want church politicized. You want church being church, but you don't want church agnostic to the issues of politics and governance, because they ultimately matter in the environment within which church operates.
You are currently in the last organizational phase, as I understand it, of putting together a school to teach politics in a more in a deeper fashion in Nigeria. Just talk us through how this idea came about and what it will look like in practice.
So when I ran for the office of President of Nigeria in 2019, and then I decided to withdraw from the race because of divergence of values between me and the political party on which ticket I was running. One of the things I decided I needed to do was to document my experience of politics. I'd never been one interested in politics at all. As a matter of fact, in Nigeria, because we practice the presidential system of government, I didn't need to win an election in order to be in cabinet. I was therefore one of the few that were not members of the political party of President Obasanjo before he decided to have us in his cabinet. And so politics was always something that I looked at from a distance. As the minister who, according to the constitution that requires that the cabinet, that a member of every state of the federation, someone from every state of the federation must be in the cabinet. So I, as minister at the time that I was minister representing Anambra State. And so ordinarily, I was supposed to, or not ordinarily, I was actually supposed to be the leader of the party in my state, Anambra State. So I wouldn't be the chair of the party in Anambra, no, but I would be the what do you call that kind of leader? There's a word, there's a way they describe them, but I would be leader, right, of the party. the way that it runs. But I chose not to have anything to do with politics. So I said to them, sorry, can somebody else play this role so that I would simply face the technical work that I am doing as a minister? I won't be able to do any of this. I am not interested in it. So I was never one interested in their politics. But as you know, I am one that's been ever interested in governance. Everything about governance, everything about policy, everything about institutions building, everything about just producing results in the way that people lead the public sector, but not the politics. And that was a big mistake, because as I have discovered, Plato was correct. If you say that you are not interested in the politics of the society you live in, you will ultimately be governed by idiots. You will be governed by your inferiors. You will be governed by people who do not share the same sense of idea of what governance should look like. And that's our story in Africa. And increasingly, that's the story in many other mature democracies, because we've also seen in some of your democracies in the West where people have basically, turned their noses at politics. And so the bottom of the drag are now getting into politics and determining what, issues matter for society. And only to pay a price for that. Society pays a price for that kind of indifference of a certain, quality of society's people, in their politics. So when I finally decided that, you know what, I have screamed and screamed and screamed about this poor governance that most manifested itself, in my mind, in the failure of our government. 2 consecutive administrations failed to give justice to children who were abducted, children who went to school. For me, oh no, it's the most painful thing that I've ever imagined could happen in this society, that a large number of children went to school, were abducted, and our governments failed the families, failed them, and did not feel anything, did not feel the remorse of failing these children and their parents. So that, for me, is the epitome of the failure of governance that drove me into a place where I said, you know what? These politicians act in this manner because nobody has challenged this mindset where it is perfectly okay to be a politician and not really care about producing the results that matter to your people. One result that mattered to me was that girls should not feel that going to school needed to cost them their lives, because that's what essentially Chibok Girls was about. I thought of the pain that families that I hugged, I held them crying on my shoulder, crying bitterly, saying, if I had known, I would not have sent her to school. My God. And I said, are you saying that our civilization is going to be traumatized by this kind of failure? What kind of society are we handing over? And the pain for me was too much. I then decided that Plato was right. I have to show more than a passing interest in the politics of this country and to get a new set of minds caring about politics, that this politics is actually what gives birth to governance. governance doesn't just emerge. It is through the political process that governance happens. And so if we don't get the upstream correct, there's no way the downstream being governance is going to yield anything meaningful. That's what led me into politics. And then I got that experience that I went through. I decided to go and, spend some moments in and engage my intellectual curiosity. So that came about, that's what resulted in fixed politics. And so the fixed politics research now is a simple finding, is a simple set of findings. It basically says that if a political system is broken, you cannot fix that political system by being anecdotal. You have to scrutinize that political system to identify the underlying causes of the dysfunctionality of your political system. And so that the democracy, which is what our own political system shapes out to be, has three critical pillars. These three critical pillars determine the outcomes in that political system. So these critical pillars I call the triangular pillars of democracy. And they are two angles at the base: the electorate, which based on the model, the economic model of analysis that I used in looking at fixed politics, I call the demand side of politics, of democracy. And the other end of the base, the political class, which I call the supply side. And then at the apex angle, you've got the constitutional, legal, regulatory context within which the two angles at the base interact. So there you're looking at the institutions and bodies like the INEC and increasingly the military establishment or the security apparatus, increasingly the judiciary, and then, of course, political institutions and establishments that matter in the electoral as well as political process. So this regulatory context and the demand side and the supply side are the basis upon which any democracy can give you a good outcome or a terrible outcome. And so analyzing these three pillars for our democracy and for other democracies on the continent of Africa, what you find is very revealing. So you look at the electorate side of this democracy, and you find an electorate that is inchoate. And it's so inchoate that when you look at the demand side, you find that it does not have any influence over political outcomes. And yet democracy is government of the people, by the people, for the people. The electorate end up in our analysis of Nigeria's politics, Africa's wider African politics, to not have influence over political outcomes. And then you analyze the political class, and you analyze them for some key attributes that underpin political class in comparable societies. And you find that our political class is hugely challenged, because whether it's in terms of values, or it's in terms of competencies, or it's in terms of capacity to lead. So you have a political class that has a poor political culture and outcome. So the political class with such poor political class, political culture and outcome is best described as a political class that subordinates the common good, the public good, for personal interest most of the times. And then you look at the regulatory context in which the demand side and the supply side interact. And you find that, well, it is lacking of the independence and fairness that defines other jurisdictions, comparable societies that practice a form of democracy or the other. And that evaluation of our political system and democracy just stares you smack in the face that, okay, so it doesn't matter what new political parties you register. If your political class has a tendency to be incapable, incompetent, and lacking of critical values of keeping the public good above private interest, you are always going to be in trouble. If your electorate is an electorate that has no influence over political outcomes, you will continue to be in trouble. If your regulatory environment is so deficient, so defective, it is unable to adjudicate the process of political competition in a way to lead into the right outcome for society, you are in trouble. The electorate being made up chiefly of the middle income class, which totally acts indifferent to the political process. They are the ones who likely would not vote on election date because they think the system is already rigged. Voting wouldn't make a difference. So, I just get the voter's card because I need it for when they say you need to show it to enter the airport. So they get the voter's card, not because they are going to vote, but because it could serve a different purpose. The low-income class are grateful to election. They show such fidelity to elections, but for the wrong reason, because most of their election day is a day of transaction. So you see that demand side is totally hopeless. And so you have to fix that. And fixing that means doing everything that you must do, the kind of interventions that we propose in the research that would enable you emerge an empowered and engaged electorate. And then on the supply side, knowing that you've got this political class that is totally undifferentiated and they act in a way that makes the politics, the democracy of Nigeria and a number of countries in Africa to be what in my research I called monopolistic democracy. Monopolistic democracy in the sense that in that interaction between the demand side and the supply side in a perfect competition model, what you would have would be an outcome that is favorable to the demand side as much as it is favorable to the supply side, but not in our democracy. In our democracy, the outcomes are favorable mostly, if not entirely, to the supply side. And so this monopolistic democracy that we see is defined by the undifferentiated political culture that you have, whether the party has a different acronym or not. APC, PDP in power, there's no differentiation. The subordination of the public good to private interest is the same. And so that's the monopolistic product That's the monopolistic hold. That's the monopolistic outcome. And so you have to address that by building a new political class that tends in the opposite direction. You have to build a political class that cares about the common good, that cares about competence, that cares about being capable to deliver governance results. And so the solution, as far as that is concerned, a key solution is to actually build a system of public leadership development. And that's how the School of Politics, Policy, and Governance came into being. We have to make sure that we produce enough quality, top quality of potential political leaders, public leaders that have the key attributes that we want to see of anyone in public office: character, capacity, competence. That's the basis of the School of Politics, Policy, and Governance. And we are starting on Monday. We had an advertisement for candidates to come to school, and some 721 or thereabout people applied. Our analysis shows that we had more than 54% of the people that applied being master's degree holders and PhDs that applied to go through this School of Politics, Policy, and Governance, because we want to build a new class of political leaders that care about values, that care about competence, that care about capacity. And of the 721, we have admitted some just close to 300 or thereabout, and they're going to be resuming school on Monday, the 1st of March. And then, of course, on the apex side of things, we have, a work going on the need for constitutional reforms. We submitted to the National Assembly that tinkering with 1999 Constitution will not address the fundamental, foundational issues that the country is wobbling on. We need a new constitution, citizens-led new constitution. We also did make representation on the Electoral Act amendment before the National Assembly. So we're taking this as a tripod of actions that are necessary, and they must be done concurrently. No longer do you want to just isolate one item and do something about it. It's a triumvirate, right? That's the right word, I think, and I hope that's the right pronunciation. So it's triangular. It's you've got to do it as an organic approach at fixing what is broken. So that's the full research given to you in my words.
Fantastic. So you're creating 721 people who will stand up to their own.
No, we didn't admit 721. Oh, okay. We admitted. I mean, the stringent, criteria to make the school. My goodness, we admitted a little less than 300. But so it's a school that will operate on the basis of speed and scale. So what we have is that every 6 months we have a new class. I imagine that our next class would be double the size of the current class, because the strong appetite for this is incredible. People really want to know politics. They want to know economics. They want to know, social issues. They want to know how to build governance systems. They really want to understand. Our curriculum was actually shaped by by empirical and factual evidence of evidences that have come from years of research and reports on why we fail in sectors that are important for development in a country, in a continent. So it's a curriculum that is actually about solving the problem. So, for example, I'm going to be teaching a class that is evidence-based policy making, the argument for results in governance, right? Or a class that Andrew Nevin is going to teach, economic systems. What does Nigeria really believe and practice? Huh? You understand? Because you until an entire society agrees what economic philosophy we subscribe to, it's going to be harder for you to find governments being able to do the necessary reforms that should happen to the economic sphere of our country, or a class that looks at disrupting politics, lessons from Africa and for Africa. That's going to be taught by Boniface Mwangi. You know him? Have you heard of Boniface Mwangi?
The Kenyan activist.
The Kenyan activist. Yeah. So, or a class that the leader as a manager, that is going to be taught by Kawala. Have you heard of Kawala?
I have not, no.
Oh, Kawala is a troublesome woman that makes beer across the fence to be uncomfortable as often as possible. She ran for president when she was just 34, about almost 20 years ago or so.
This is fantastic, and so
and then we have courses in economics, in trade policy, in technology, in education, in climate change, in everything. What basically forms our curriculum is everything that is the knowledge gap that we see amongst our political class today, the things that make them fail to make the right sets of policies, build the right kinds of institutions, determine the right priorities of investment for the society. Those are the things that form our curriculum. So when you've been through our school, I want to vote for you.
How many of the first cohort of nearly 300, how many of them are already in government in some way or another?
A good population, actually. I hate to use data when I don't have it right on my finger, but I can actually send to you some of that analysis later. But what I find quite fascinating is how, many, when you look at the population, some 56 or thereabout % of the people say they are prepared to run for office in 2023. Another, the balance of it are running for office in 2027. So you can see that, wow, we're going to get this right. People who come through this school, when they are campaigning to run for office, you're going to be hearing a different kind of message, because we're not training them to be like the people that we currently see and are not satisfied with. We want to raise the quality of public leadership in our country. We know that if we could just get government to work effectively, I am telling you, Nigeria's prosperity is right at the corner. It is waiting for the right kind of, leadership, not just at the presidential level. It's that's not even as a guaranteeing of success as making sure that the people who were voting into office in National Assembly, in the state assemblies as governors, that they are people who get it. That's what we're doing. We're doing a leadership revolution through deliberate and intentional design of what the future should look like for our public leadership.
Well, I'm certainly sure that that could help solve the demand side of things if Nigerian citizens suddenly see their leaders talking about the problems that matter to them in a coherent manner. I'm sure that they will be lured back into the more traditional political process.
Thank you for quoting a section of the research. Thank you very much, Nick. I've had a good time talking with you.
Me too.
Have a good one. God bless you.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.
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 That's all for this week. Our thanks to Obiageli Ezekwesili. Don't forget, if you'd like to sign up and get a discount to the Africa Report special digital edition, please email us feedback@theafricareport.com and mention Talking Africa to claim your special offer. And if you can, why not rate and review Talking Africa wherever you get your podcasts? I'm Nick Norbrook. Thanks for listening.